We have got every single angle covered this hour with top officials from both campaigns, a supersized panel of political insiders, and of course, our team of NBC reporters on the ground in the spin room and in key battlegrounds. And the great Steve Kornacki is on set with me to dive into the data. So let's start with our NBC team in the spin room. Garrett Haake covered the Trump campaign. Monica Alba is covering the Harris campaign. Garrett, I have to start with you. This extraordinary day of debate phone conversation that you had with former President Donald Trump. Very well done. Tell me what your key takeaways were.
Well, Kristen, I think the former president is eager to get on the debate stage. After my conversation with him and some of his key advisors, I think he was kind of punting debate preparation until the last couple of days, which I'm told he really did dial in over the weekend, much longer and more focused sessions. And now I think he's eager to try to use what he's been preparing for on the debate stage itself. As you pointed out, he told me that he thinks one of the most challenging parts about debating Kamala Harris is this idea that she has changed her position on key issues and sort of what position are you responding to. But the way he and his campaign appear to have solved that problem, at least in their planning, is that they're going to try to use whatever they think the most liberal or the most out of the mainstream answer she has given on any particular question, on any particular policy, and suggest that that is in fact her true belief, her true policy, regardless of what she might say on the debate stage. Now, I say planning to do this because this is always the case with Donald Trump and his campaign. They have a plan, they have a structure, they put sort of guardrails in place to keep him on this mission. But what Donald Trump decides to do once those lights turn on the debate stage is up only to Donald Trump, and we'll see how he responds in real time.
That is just going to be the critical question. And of course, one of the big X factors and one of the really fascinating aspects of tonight's debate is that it is Donald Trump who will suddenly be the candidate whose age and agility is in focus, given that he's about 20 years older than Vice President Kamala Harris. How is he planning to deal with that? How is the campaign dealing with that aspect of the debate, Garrett?
Well, it's interesting because the way that the campaign prepares doesn't involve, standing at the podium for 90 minutes. It doesn't involve the kind of structure that the Harris team uses, for example. So I don't know that they've drilled this specifically, but I think what the Trump campaign would say is that this is someone who regularly holds rallies that go 90 minutes or 2 hours, regularly does interviews, and is fairly quick on his feet when it comes to how he approaches answers to tough questions. Now, that said, he's going to get more tough questions potentially from more directions tonight than I think he's used to getting of late. Most of his longer form interviews have been with friendlier outlets or with a podcast, for example, that might be a little bit of a slower burn than what he may get from Harris. Again, how Harris decides, the vice president decides to try to get under Trump's skin, nobody who interviews him is intentionally trying to get under his skin or upset him in a way that Kamala Harris is likely to try to do tonight. And I just don't know that that's something that they've explicitly aimed for.
Well, that takes us perfectly to Monica Alba, who's been all over the reporting about how the vice president has been preparing and her strategy heading into tonight. So, Monica, what are your sources telling you about what her plan is, both to try to get under former President Trump's skin and also to convince voters that she is a candidate of change?
They have been trying all day long in the lead up to tonight, Kristen, to try to needle Donald Trump when possible, whether it be with these billboards that we're seeing all over Philadelphia that are trying to poke some fun at the former president and his obsession with crowd size, which is a theme that we also saw today in a new ad that was released where former President Obama talked about that in his Democratic National Convention speech. Those are the kinds of things that they're trying to use, again, to take a page a bit out of Donald Trump's own playbook and try to troll him, perhaps. And you're also going to see that in the form of some of the former Trump administration officials who are going to be coming to the spin room where Garrett and I are here tonight to try to talk about this from the perspective of we're people who signed up to work for the Trump-Pence administration, and here's why we then left and decided to become complete critics of it. So they're going to try to use those kinds of tactics on one hand. On the other, that's because they know there will be maybe a moment that's viral that comes from this crosstalk between Donald Trump and Kamala Kamala Harris, where there could be personal attacks, where there could be derogatory comments. But in terms of the larger substance, there is this big question here for the vice president and challenge that her advisors concede. Voters feel like they don't know her as well, even if she's been in the background, in the periphery over these last 3.5 years of the Biden-Harris administration. When it comes to certain issues and policies, they know that she's going to try to lay out her vision for that. So she's been working on getting all of those answers into 2-minute formats as well. But really what so many people are going to be curious about, Kristen, is this idea of how will these two people who have never met interact? What will that look like? How will it play out on stage? And of course, those unscripted moments. We've seen the former president go after people again in those personal ways. So the vice president is ready, has sort of had some pre-planned responses to that, I'm told. But how they play out in the moment is a completely different matter. So we'll be watching for all of that, of course.
Well, it is just going to be fascinating, just to underscore that point, Monica, the fact that they've never met before. I also want to make another point, which is that this will be Donald Trump's 7th general election debate, which is just incredible if you think about it. And of course, we're going all the way back to 2016. This is going to be the first for Vice President Kamala Harris, although she's no stranger to the debate stage, Monica, right?
Exactly. And that is where you're starting to see the expectation game really playing out here a bit, with the Harris team saying, look, he has so much experience. He's been doing this for almost a decade. They did go and watch basically all the game film on that, and every time he's participated in something like this. So they have a lot to study from, but they're trying to also raise this issue with the debate rules as something that they keep bringing up again when we talk about expectations. They believe that the fact that the microphones are supposed to be muted when the candidate whose turn it isn't to speak is going is something that they continue to raise as a major issue they think is going to disadvantage the vice president. They continue to say that they want Americans to have an unfiltered view of what Donald Trump is like on the debate stage. So that's why they keep raising those kinds of things to also, again, try to convey to Americans, well, she may not have as much experience. He does with this. So if she doesn't perform the way they want, they're going to point back to those things I think you can expect. Kristen.
Well, fantastic reporting to start us off. Garrett and Monica, thank you so much. Joining me now from Michigan is NBC's Shaq Brewster, who's been talking to voters about what they are watching for tonight. So, Shaq, you are in Grand Rapids. Of course, this is a key swing county in a key swing state. I've been talking to Michigan officials who say, boy, it is going to be close in Michigan, as it is going to be in the rest of the country. What are these voters telling you about what they're going to be watching for tonight?
Well, I'll tell you, a lot of people say they are planning to watch closely. A lot of people are just frankly excited about the prospect of seeing these candidates on stage together. And earlier today, I went to Ada, Michigan, which is in Kent County. And this is a town where, yes, it's a suburban area of Grand Rapids. It's wealthier than the general population, certainly more highly educated than your average American town. But it's an area where back in 2016, Donald Trump won by 14 percentage points. And in 2020, he only won by 2 percentage points. So you see that erosion happening. And I went there to see what people had to say about what they're expecting in tonight's debate. Listen to some of those conversations. When it was Biden and Trump, you were thinking of not voting at all.
Not voting at all or going independent.
And right now, with it being Harris and Trump,
I'm leaning to voting, but it's still very much still deciding as to whom.
I think it will be very important.
why is that?
I think some people think she's not very strong for president, and I hope that her performance tonight will show that she's the right candidate.
It would be helpful if he would not be as bombastic, but Trump is Trump. Trump will be Trump, and I realize that. But I just realize also that we were in a far better place pre-COVID while Trump was in office than we have been since. And I want to get back to that.
While plenty of people say they will be watching, not everyone will be tuning in. I spoke to one mom who said that she's not going to watch tonight, at least, because she says she has young children. And when I asked what that has to do with the debate, she said, I don't think it's something that they should be listening to. She's scared that it's going to be too crazy. It's almost a sign of our times that she's not comfortable enough having her kids watch a presidential debate.
So fascinating. And of course, the moms are going to have a big influence over who wins this election. Shaq Brewster, thank you very much. Turning now to none other than Steve Kornacki at the big board. Steve, so great to have you to really set the stage for us. Obviously, you and I have been talking for a long time. This is a very close race, whether we're talking nationally or in battleground states. How do you see this race right now?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. Let's start nationally here, Kristen. This is the average of all the major national polls that are out there right now. Harris 47, Trump 45. Now, that's down a tick from where it was before the weekend. Harris had been ahead by 3 in the national average. Some of the more recent national polls, that New York Times one the other day that had Trump ahead, getting some attention here, bringing this average a little bit closer. And it also raises one of the questions, too. One of the big questions as we head towards Election Day. Remember that in 2016 and 2020, we saw a very big disconnect between the national popular vote and the Electoral College, where the presidency was actually decided. Trump winning in 2016 the Electoral College despite losing the popular vote, and then nearly doing it again in 2020 against Joe Biden. So the context for Trump trailing by 2 right now to Harris is, if that dynamic persists, if Trump continues to have an advantage in the Electoral College, then being down 2 in the popular vote is not a bad place for him at all. If it's changed, this could be more significant, the Democrats being ahead in the national popular vote. But look at those states right now. Here's our polling average in the 7 core battleground states right now. And you do see some Trump red. You see some Harris blue here. You see a tie. But mainly what you see, razor-thin margins, 1.5, as we say, a tie. 1/2 of 1 percentage point. Just very, very much on a knife's edge here. Draw your attention to this one, though. Wisconsin, Harris with a little bit better than a 4-point lead on average here right now. And that's the other question we have that's sort of a holdover from 16 and 20, and that is the question of the polling miss. No state in 2020 where the polls more off than they were in Wisconsin. Biden was ahead well into the double digits in some polls in Wisconsin weeks before the election. It ended up being less than 1 point, Joe Biden's margin of victory there. Michigan, you see another blue state from 2020. Polling was off to a pretty big degree there as well in 2020. Why is it? Again, these polling misses that we've seen, they've not been popping up in every state to the same degree. They've been more pronounced in the northern swing states, the states with larger populations of blue-collar white voters without 4-year degrees. And essentially voters from that demographic who support Trump were underestimated in states like Wisconsin in 16 and 20. Are they being underestimated again? We really won't know till Election Day, but I think that's the question to ask when you start seeing state-level polling, especially in those states. If that happens again, these numbers end up meaning something very different than they look like. If that issue has been fixed in polling and is not a problem anymore, then these numbers are very encouraging for Democrats. And again, we won't know till election night, so it's just a reminder. I think when you see these polls, take them with a grain of salt. And then, Kristen, as you say, heading into tonight, just some of the more immediate numbers, I think, on the stage that are interesting. This one here from that New York Times poll, asking voters to make up your mind. Do you need to know more about a candidate? Far more, 3-to-1 margin say that about Kamala Harris than Donald Trump. And that might be a good thing for Harris from her perspective, because here is a matter where she'd like to change public opinion about her. And it's the change versus status quo question. Same poll here. A majority of voters in this poll say they view Harris as more of the same. She is the vice president in an unpopular administration. Trump, the former president, 53% outright majority saying he represents major change. So Harris, we see the opportunity there with all those voters wanting to know more about her. Maybe a way of measuring if she's been successful is, does this number change for her at all?
Yeah, Stephen, it's so fascinating because all those numbers that you just laid out really give each candidate a roadmap of what they need to do if they want to be successful tonight, and that change issue right there at the top of the list. Steve Kornacki, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.